So, in the previous post, I addressed the idea of choosing a topic. And I wanted to sort of give that idea some more depth, as well as go a little bit past it into the next step when we're looking at research. So, when you are either trying to find a topic or trying to clarify a topic you already have, there's a few things you can do. And we're going to call this a questioning stance, where you ask yourself questions in order to better understand what it is you want to know. And we're just going to go through like all the questions that a person can ask, all the types of questions. So for example, what? At this point, you need to at least have some vague idea of what your topic is. So that's the first thing you answer. What is your topic? And I'm going to use some of my research as an example for this video to show you how I answered these questions when I had to. So what was my topic? And that was the idea of how people in education talk to each other, write for each other, read text. I wanted to know more about how people in education look at literacy. That was my broad topic. The next one that you can ask yourself is why. So you asked what, now we're going to ask why. Why is this important? So the reason, and we're going to start off with why is it important to me? And so when you're looking at your topic, ask why is this topic important to you? It needs to be important to you for some reason, or you're not going to be very successful researching it because you won't care. So why is it important to me? Well, I'm trying to join the community of educators. I want to know how educators communicate because I want to be a part of that communication now that I am getting a higher level, like a terminal degree. Okay, so who is the next question? We did what? We did why. Now we're going to look at who. And the who is, who will be affected? Who will this topic's answer affect? Now, it's going to affect me. That's one. But beyond that, who could possibly benefit from knowing the answer to my question? For me, that could be pre-service teachers. That could be teachers in the field. That could be teacher educators who, because they better understand how educators think, are then better able to instruct future educators. Maybe policymakers would want to know this. Maybe this could benefit students indirectly, because with better educators and better teachers, students have a better experience. Which could affect parents, which could affect communities. It can go pretty far. Don't have to go down a rabbit hole, but just realize that your question affects more than you. If it doesn't, it's not a good enough question. It has to be able to serve multiple groups of people, I think. All right, next question is when. So we've got a topic. We have a reason for looking into it. We have an audience that we want to try and reach, maybe multiple audiences. So now we need to kind of take a step back and let's go, okay, now I need to start looking into this topic more in depth. And the first thing I want to know is when. When did people start looking at this topic in any way? For my purposes, when did people start thinking about how we teach and how we create new knowledge in education and then get that knowledge to other people? When did that start? And this really leads into the next one, which is where. And that is, where does my research fit? I need to figure out the place that it goes. In the previous post, I talked about finding that gap in the research. You're reading something and you have a question that's left unanswered when you're done reading it. That gap. So you need to establish where that gap is. Describe everything that came before it, everything that's happening around it, that space that needs to be filled. Where is that space? We got to describe it. so that other researchers can understand what part of the puzzle we're trying to fill in with our piece. And then lastly, and this is a big one for me, I think this one's huge. Oh, and by the way, for my own research, the where, that is such a huge, I can't answer that in this. It's about, there's so many facets of it. There's when did people start even looking at how different communities communicate? This idea that we communicate differently in the first place, and then looking at how teachers have been trained in the past and who's done it and why. There's so much. I'm not going to get into it in too much in depth, but those are sort of things you need to ask yourself before you get to this last big idea, and that is how. Okay, we got what we want to look at. We know why we want to look at it. We know who we could help by looking at it. We know when people started looking at it and where in that whole picture our research is going to fit. How are you going to research it? How are you going to add to the topic? That's what your whole research is going to be about. Answering that how question is going to be like your methodology section in its entirety. It's a big question. My first step, for example, is that I put together a focus group of teacher educators, people who teach pre-service teachers, to get together and talk about how they read and then also how they present reading to their students. And that's where I've started. And I got a long way to go to answer my question. That was my first step. So let's see, a couple things to point out. When you're answering the questions of where and when did my research start, where does my research fit, that's your lit review, and then how is going to be more of like your methodology, and then the answer to your question is going to be your data analysis and your conclusion, and that's a pretty basic step-by-step for a paper. And I just have kind of a questioning mind, so for me I always think about what question am I answering, and if I write something that doesn't help answer that question or one of the questions I have, then I shouldn't have written it and I need to rethink it. Couple of things to kind of just tack on towards the end. I know this is getting super long. I'm going to wrap it up. There are good questions and there are bad questions. I sort of touched on this a little bit. For example, it's a bad question if only you care about the answer. It's not worth writing a paper about if the only thing you're answering is something that matters to you or your second cousin once removed. It's got to be broader than that to have any sort of a validity. And let's see, another thing, don't ask a question that can be answered in a single sentence. What was Grover Cleveland's cousins on his mother's side's name? Just don't ask anything that just has one fact, and if you find that fact, boom, you got the answer to your question. As a matter of fact, don't ask any questions that you can completely answer just by looking at other people's research. It might happen. You might go through the first couple of steps, what your topic is, why it's important, who could be affected by it, when did they start looking into it. And you might get to where do I fit, and unfortunately find you don't. There is no gap. Throughout your more extensive research, you realize this question has been answered. Oops. Sorry. You're going to have to think of something else. Think about what's the next step after that. Where can your new gap be? Because your question was answered by somebody else. It's not super helpful to answer a question that somebody else already answered. I mean, it's good to find that answer, and maybe there's reasons to get that answer into broader audiences, but you're starting to walk that fine line of, am I doing research or am I doing a book report? We're trying to go to research here, which means we want to be answering new questions. Let's see. So, yeah. You want to be able to say, just to sum everything up, you want to be able to say what you're researching, why you're researching it, who that research could help, and what it's going to help them do. Once you can answer all of those things, you're in a really good place to start hitting the books hard and finding information that's going to help you answer it, designing some sort of project that is going to produce new information to help answer your question. And we're gonna start talking about that next. We're gonna start talking about types of research and methodologies and all kinds of really fancy stuff that I do not completely understand yet. So I am sure that I will get things wrong, and I look forward to being told how wrong I am. So that's it for today. I am so sorry this video was so long, and have a good one.